The laughter landed before the paperwork did. Sharp and public. Like the crack of a glass against marble. Folders slid across the table toward me. Thick enough to look generous. The CEO leaned back, enjoying the room. A few people avoided my eyes. A few didn't bother. Savannah was written across the cover in bold type. As if distance alone could make this feel cleaner. This is a transition, someone murmured. Already standing. I stayed seated. The air felt thinner, the way it does right before a fall. When the CEO finally looked at me, his smile widened, practiced and unbothered. He gestured to the stack. Have fun dealing with this mess. A ripple of amusement moved the table. The hotel. Historic. Bankrupt. On the verge. I'd seen the numbers. I'd also seen the footnotes nobody read. I pressed my thumb into the edge of the folder until it hurt. My name was already on the cover, printed like an afterthought. My name is Alara Whitmore. I am 37 years old. The sentence formed in my head while my stomach tightened. Not as an introduction, but as a reminder that this was the moment people would later pretend they hadn't witnessed. The CEO checked his watch. Somewhere down the table. A lawyer stacked his pen with surgical neatness. The room was ready to move on. I just need one thing, I said, and let my voice wobble. Not much. Just enough. The CEO tilted his head. Amused. The lawyer didn't. I opened the folder and slid a single page to the top. Cleanup language. Boring language. The kind people skim when they're already thinking about lunch. I kept my hands visible. Empty. Sign here. I added, softer. It makes the transfer cleaner. A pause, a breath. The lawyer leaned in, eyes flicking once to the margin, then away. The CEO waved him off without looking. He signed fast, eager to be done. Ink dragging slightly at the end. Chairs scraped. The meeting dissolved around me. Someone clapped again, uncertain this time. In the quiet that followed, I gathered the folders and stood. The paper felt heavier now. Alive in my hands. In the final pages. Buried among the debris they were so eager to dump. The claws waited dry. Precise, patient. A small note before I go on this story is a work created by the writing team at Revenge AITA. Told as it unfolded. Not as it would later be summarized. I turned toward the door, already feeling the shift. The pull of something dangerous and deliberate taking hold. Why did the CEO's lawyer hesitate before the pen touched the paper? The lock fought me before giving in. The kind of resistance that felt personal inside. The front desk lights were off. A man in a windbreaker stood near the elevator bank. Phone already raised. He lowered it when he noticed me. You're late, he said, like I'd missed an appointment that mattered. I'm early, I replied, setting my bag down where a bell once sat. Everyone else already left. He snorted. After the third lawsuit notice showed up taped to the door. I would have too. We walked. Not a tour. A procession. Every step brought another problem to the surface. Mold claims, wage disputes, a contractor's lien thick with legal language. Someone had scratched a crude warning into the drywall near the stairwell. Don't stay the night. You hear the stories, he asked? Stopping short of the hallway? People say it's haunted. I kept moving. People say lots of things. By noon. The rumor had legs. By sunset. It had teeth. I didn't correct anyone. I nudged. A post here. A whisper there. A call that never traced back to me. The city listened. Buyers backed off. Appraisers revised their numbers downward with embarrassed coughs. My phone buzzed. A message from an old colleague who never texted without a reason. He thinks it's radioactive now. No name needed. I pictured the CEO's smile tightening. His attention drifting elsewhere. At a folding table in the back office. A woman with tired eyes slid a folder toward me. If you plan to fight these, she said, tapping the stack, you'll need time. I'm not fighting them. I said, flipping the folder closed. I'm feeding them. Her brow creased. That makes no sense. It did. Just not yet. Outside, a pair of men argued over a survey marker near the curb. One kicked it aside. This whole block's dead, he muttered, loud enough to be useful. I leaned against the door frame and listened to the street decide my fate for me. Each word dragging the numbers lower. each rumor tightening the noose I wanted. What kind of investor profits from making her own property worthless by nightfall? An email landed from a city office asking for clarification. I typed back a single line and hit send. Careful with the phrasing, careful with the timing. The screen went dark. Somewhere uptown. Someone would exhale and move on. Here. The ground was softening exactly where I needed it to. The archivist didn't look up when I placed the request slip on the counter. Her finger traced the line once, then again. She finally raised her eyes, measuring me. You're asking for material. Nobody requests anymore. I know. I said, that's why I'm here. She hesitated, then pushed a thin box toward me. The label was faded. The tape replaced more than once. You didn't get this from me. I opened it at a long table where the chairs creaked under small movements. The pages inside weren't dramatic. No bold warnings, just zoning notes, preservation addendums, and a section header that made my pulse jump, code 127. A man dropped into the chair across from me without asking. His tie was loosened. His sleeves rolled. That code ruins deals, he said, eyes flicking to the page. Most developers don't even know it exists. It protects corridors, I replied, keeping my voice even, and what runs under them. He smiled without warmth. You're not supposed to notice the aquifer until you already own the block. And the archives, I asked. Same rule, he said. Only certified entities can access what's below. Heritage status changes everything? I turned the page. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Once, then again. I ignored it. How fast does certification reprice a property like mine? He leaned back, considering fast enough to make people angry. I slid the folder closed. Good. A woman from the city office appeared at my shoulder, voice low. If you file for certification, you'll trigger reviews. Public ones. I'm counting on it. She studied me, then nodded. Paper trail matters. So does timing. Back in the hallway. My phone buzzed again. This time I checked it. A message from a nonprofit I'd set up months earlier. Dormant until now. We can submit tonight. I typed back a single word and sent it. Proceed. As I stepped outside, a developer argued with someone on the steps. Frustration spilling over. That place is a sinkhole, he snapped. There's nothing there. Why would anyone hide a fortune beneath a collapsing hotel? My phone rang. A different number. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. The voice on the other end sounded cautious now. We're hearing things, he said. About Savannah. Then you're listening, I replied, and ended the call before he could take control back. He showed up late and didn't apologize. That was the first test. I watched him clock the exits before he noticed me. When he finally did, he smiled like someone who already knew the ending. You should fire me, he said, dropping into the chair across from my desk. If the rumors are true, I let the silence stretch. Papers sat between us, deliberately messy. Which rumor, I asked. He shrugged. Pick one. Structural issues. Insolvency? City pressure. I slid a single spreadsheet forward. The numbers were bad on purpose. He scanned, nodded, and pushed it back. This collapses in 90 days. Make it 60, I said, and make it loud. His eyebrow twitched. You want panic. I want predictability. He stood, already reaching for his phone. He'll react. That's why you're here. By the end of the week, the leaks were everywhere. Anonymous tips, a breathless article, a consultant quoted without context. The CEO didn't call me. He moved faster than that. Trucks arrived at dawn on adjacent streets. Fences went up. Utility crews followed. Then surveyors, defensive investments, dressed up as prudence. A ring tightened around my property like a polite siege. My phone buzzed. A vendor message routed through a company I didn't officially control. Invoice approved. Funds received. Another buzz. Second tranche cleared. I walked the perimeter with the manager that afternoon. He pretended not to see the new conduit being laid. They're trying to starve you out, he said, voice pitched for any listener who might be close. I nodded, letting him believe it. Then we should look hungry. He hesitated, then asked the question he'd been holding. What happens when he cuts you off completely? I watched the crew lower reinforced lines exactly where my plans had marked months ago. The money kept flowing. Obedient and blind? What if your enemy's best move was exactly what you needed that night? A courier dropped off updated permits, stamped and clean. I signed where required and forwarded copies to 3 addresses the CEO trusted. The manager texted a final update before going dark. He bought it. Across town. Lights came on where there had been none. Here. The choke tightened, and with it, the foundation beneath me grew stronger. Layer by paid-for layer. The first headline hit before breakfast. By noon, there were 3 more, each sharper than the last. A producer called and didn't bother hiding the smile in her voice. "We're running a piece tonight," she said. "You should be available." "For what?" I asked. "Your response." She said, "Already done with me." I hung up and walked the floor. 2 rooms were empty that hadn't been yesterday. A housekeeper waited by the elevator. Keys in her hand. "They say inspectors are coming again," she said. "I can't afford another week like this." I nodded and took the keys. She didn't say goodbye. By afternoon, the phone stopped ringing. Not busy. Dead. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears. I sat at the desk and watched the silence spread. It felt intentional. A knock broke it. Not the front door, the side entrance. A man stepped in without looking around. He didn't offer a hand. "I have 10 minutes, he said. "Say something useful." "I know who you backed," I replied. "I know when he pushed you out." His jaw tightened. He sat. Another knock. Different face. Same posture. A woman slid her phone across the table without sitting. "This is what he promised," she said. "This is what he delivered." I didn't reassure them. I didn't defend myself. I let them talk. Every word was a fracture I could widen later. The news vans idled out front by dusk, lights waiting for a reaction that never came. Inside, a 3rd guest arrived through the kitchen. He laughed once when he saw the room. "You look finished," he said. "Then you should leave," I replied. He didn't. He closed the door instead. When the last meeting ended, the building felt hollowed out. No staff voices, no phones. Just me and the after-image of all the things said quietly while the city shouted. Who listens when the noise suddenly stops? My phone vibrated once. A short message from a blocked number. Board meeting moved up. I deleted it and sent a different text to a contact I hadn't used in years. "Tomorrow, same place. Bring the documents." Outside, the vans finally rolled away. The quiet stayed. I locked the door behind the last guest and stood there a moment longer than necessary, already feeling the next pressure point forming, already moving toward it. He didn't give a name when he arrived. Didn't need to. The confidence did the talking. He set his phone on the table, screen down, and waited for me to notice it vibrating. "You're bleeding," he said. "Finally, we can stop it." I didn't touch the phone. "You didn't come here to be generous." A thin smile. "We came to be early." He slid a single page across the table. No letterhead. Clean numbers. The kind meant to feel inevitable. "We buy the property. Quietly. You walk away solvent." I let the paper sit where it was. Outside. A camera lens caught the light and moved on. "If I say no," I asked, "do you walk?" "No," he said. "We leak that we tried. That would hurt you. It would hurt you first." I stood, folded the paper once, and placed it back in front of him. "Then we're done." He studied me, then laughed, surprised. "You're making a mistake. I make them all the time." I replied, "This isn't one." By evening. The rumor was everywhere except where it mattered. A whisper to a banker who liked leverage. A forwarded email to a partner who hated being late. The offer took on a life of its own once it wasn't mine anymore. Calls I hadn't returned in weeks came through with different tones. Curious. Careful. A banker leaned forward during a call. Voice low. "You turned down real money. I turned down control." I said. Silence stretched. Then, softer. "Send us your updated projections. What if refusing money makes you richer than accepting it?" By night. The phones were busy again. Not desperate. Interested. The numbers shifted without me touching them. Paper value swelling on air. I watched the change register and faces across screens. The calculation recalibrate. A message lit up from the same block number as before. Valuation spike noted. Explain, I didn't respond. I forwarded the banker's request instead. CCing an address the CEO trusted too much. When the building finally quieted, I packed my bag and turned off the lights myself. The offer was still out there, doing its work, growing teeth, tomorrow. The pressure would come from a new direction, sharper and less polite. I locked the door and walked into it anyway. The cut came without warning. Power first, then water, then the suppliers stopped answering calls they'd always answered before. A message flashed from a vendor I'd known for years. Orders paused. Corporate instruction, no apology. Just distance. I walked into the control room and watched the meters hold steady. The light stayed on. The hum didn't change. A technician glanced at me, waiting for panic that never came. They think you'll fold, he said. They think I need them, I replied. By afternoon, another call slipped through, not hostile, curious. We can extend credit, the voice said. Short term. Against what? I asked. Your shares, he said. The ones everyone pretends don't matter. I checked the clause again. Clean, activated. Collateral accepted. The first line of credit landed before dusk, then another. The money didn't come from friends. It came from people who hated the CEO enough to enjoy this. A courier arrived with a clipboard. I signed without hesitation. Trucks rolled in through a side gate that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Fuel, food, replacement parts, direct routes. Paid in advance. My phone rang. This time he didn't hide. We've tightened the perimeter. The CEO said, voice smooth. You'll feel it soon. I already do, I said. And let him hear the generator kick on behind me. Silence stretched. Then a short laugh. You're burning cash? I'm investing, I said, who was actually being fattened for slaughter. An alert chimed on my screen. Parent company stock dipped. Then dipped again. A lender messaged, almost giddy, margin satisfied, ready for expansion. I forwarded the alert to an address that monitored my movements too closely. No comment. Just data. By night, the choke he'd planned for me tightened somewhere else. Calls stacked up from banks that hadn't returned mine in months. I ignored them until the last one. Then answered. We need assurances, the voice said. You'll get them? I replied. In writing? I ended the call and watched the numbers move again. Red this time. Not mine. Outside, the city went dark in patches. Inside, everything ran. The trap wasn't snapping yet, it was closing. Slow and certain. And tomorrow he would feel the pressure shift for the first time. The call came while I was reviewing signatures, the kind that arrive after decisions have already been made. It passed, the voice said, tight with disbelief. Unanimous. I closed the folder without rushing. Effective immediately. A pause. Papers shifting. Effective immediately. Another line chimed in. This one sharper. You understand what this means? I do. By noon, the designation went public. Architectural landmark, protected corridor, certified entity. The hotel's value didn't climb so much as detonate. Screens refreshed. Numbers rewrote themselves faster than anyone could argue with them. My phone lit up. Lawyers first, then banks, then people who hadn't taken my calls in years. I let most of them ring. A junior associate from a firm the CEO favored finally broke through. We need to discuss the implications, she said, breathless. There's nothing to discuss, I replied. The clause is live. Silence. Then, quieter. He wasn't supposed to sign that. He did. The first purchase went through before lunch. A small block. Quiet. Voting shares that nobody thought mattered until they did. Another followed. Routed through a trust that had existed longer than his confidence. The system accepted each transaction without comment. A board member called next. Trying for casual. You're moving quickly. I'm moving legally. You're creating complications. I'm resolving them. What happens when a joke becomes a legal weapon? The CEO's office attempted contact twice. I declined both. His counsel sent a message instead. Clipped informal. Client disputes applicability. I forwarded the landmark certification and the executed clause in response. No commentary. The reply took longer this time. When it came, it was careful. Client will review. By evening, the lockout was complete. Access revoked. Objections filed too late. He was still the face, still the voice, but no longer the hand on the wheel. A final call came from someone who knew how to read a room. You have leverage, IT said. How far are you taking this? I watched the next acquisition clear, clean, and irreversible, as far as it goes. When the line disconnected, I stayed where I was and opened a new document. Tomorrow's agenda populated itself as alerts continued to arrive, each one tightening the net. The device had been triggered. Now it would do what it was built to do. The alert came through just after market open. Not mine. His. The resort 2 blocks from mine glass. Steel. IGO went dark on the feeds. Permits suspended. Work orders frozen. A single line in the notice carried the weight non-compliance with preservation corridor. My phone buzzed once. Then again, I ignored both and kept reading as the price slid. Paused. Slid again. A third call forced its way through. I answered without greeting. We need to talk. I let the silence do its work. The line breathed on the other end, shallow and fast. So did I replied. 5 years ago. He swallowed the sound. This isn't the same. It is, I said. You just recognize it now? He tried control next. You've made your point. We can unwind this. I didn't wind it. I said I executed it. A voice cut in behind him. Urgent and muffled. He covered the receiver and failed. I heard numbers. I heard the word liquidity. When he came back, the edge was gone. We need time. You had it. I said, you spent it? The stock halted, then reopened lower. A message flashed from a lender who'd laughed at me months earlier. We require assurance by end of day. I glanced at the clock and answered the call again. There's a meeting. I said, boardroom. Noon. On what terms? He asked, the original ones. I replied, in writing. A pause stretched long enough to feel like a decision breaking. You're enjoying this. I didn't answer that. I watched the price tick down another notch and felt the room tilt. Not with excitement, but with precision. Was I about to save him or finish him? The call ended without agreement. Good. My screen filled with confirmations as voting blocks aligned. Quiet and obedient. A text arrived from counsel. Quorum secured. I stood and gathered the documents already arranged. Outside. Sirens cut across traffic near the stalled site. Inside, my calendar populated itself with one item. Bolded and final. Board meeting. Noon. I walked toward it without rushing. The pressure settling into place behind me. Ready for what came next. The room went quiet the moment I walked in. Not polite quiet. Hisab quiet. The kind that happens when people realize the agenda has already been decided. I took the seat at the head of the table without asking. A few folders shifted. No one stopped me. He was already there. Thinner, less certain. The confidence that used to fill the room now sat folded in front of him. Careful not to take up space. You can't do this, he said, too quickly. I placed the document between us and slid it forward. I already did. A hand reached for it. Stopped halfway. Someone on his side whispered. Urgent and useless. He scanned the first page, then the signature block, then the voting summary that followed. His mouth opened, closed. This was supposed to be a joke. He said, it was, I replied, just not for me. He leaned back, searching the room for support that wasn't there anymore. You want control, he said. Say it. I have control. I said, what I want is resolution. The chair beside him scraped back as a board member stood. The motion passes, she said, eyes already on me. Effective immediately. He laughed once, sharp and empty. You gave me nothing. I met his eyes. You gave me a bankrupt hotel. I gave you 5 years to underestimate me. His pen lay untouched near the edge of the table. Mine was already capped. That wasn't a joke. I said, this is... The room moved on without him. Papers collected. Phones buzzed. Decisions rolled forward. Clean and final. He stayed seated, staring at a future that no longer belonged to him. Later, alone, I stood by the window and felt the weight lift. Not triumph, closure, the kind that comes when you stop asking for permission. Here's what I learned when someone tries to humiliate you. Don't rush to defend yourself. Take the time to understand where the power actually sits. Then move quietly until it's yours. Thank you for staying with me through this. If this story resonated, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories about boundaries, patience, and choosing yourself, you know where to find them. You're not being promoted. The words landed flat like paperwork. No warning, no soft let in. A few chairs creaked. Someone stopped tapping a laptop key mid-stroke. I stayed still. Not calm frozen. The CEO didn't pause to see how it hit. The role has been reassigned. She nodded once toward the screen behind her. The slide changed. Not a title. Not an org chart. A single line. Bolded. Personal accountability acknowledgement, signed Marin Caldwell. The room shifted all at once. You can hear that kind of movement when people understand danger at the same time. Someone muttered my name under their breath. Someone else leaned back. Already distancing themselves. That's your responsibility to carry. No explanation followed. None was needed. I stared at the signature. Mine. The slant was wrong. I always signed too fast when someone was waiting. I remembered the day I'd written it. A quiet office. A casual smile. Just a formality before we move you up. My name is Marin Caldwell. I am 42 years old. I had built this project piece by piece, fixed what broke before anyone else noticed, and absorbed every decision that made senior leadership look decisive, standing there, with my name projected larger than it had ever been on any promotion list. I understood I hadn't been rewarded. I had been designated. A hand went up near the far end of the table. It dropped before the CEO even looked that way. If there are no questions, she said, already turning the page on her binder, we'll proceed. Proceed where no one spoke. Not because they agreed, because no one wanted their name on the next slide. The CEO finally looked at me then, not apologetic, evaluating, as if checking whether I understood the arrangement. I nodded once. It was easier than breathing. In the final third of this chapter, it's important to note that this story is a work of fiction created by our writing team, drawing from composite professional scenarios rather than any single real case. The meeting moved on. Budgets, timelines, safe topics. My name didn't appear again, but it didn't need to. It was already where it counted. By the time the screen went dark, one truth was clear. This wasn't about a promotion anymore. It was about who would burn if the project failed. And I couldn't stop wondering when agreeing to move up had turned into signing myself into the line of fire. 6 months earlier, she closed the door herself. Not gently, not hard, just enough to signal this wasn't a conversation meant to travel. The folder landed between us. Thinner than I expected. No letterhead on top. No title that matched the weight she'd been giving the role all week. This is standard, she said, already flipping to the last page. Pre-promotion compliance? I didn't open it right away. The silence stretched. She watched me the way people do when they're waiting for you to catch up to a decision they've already made. We can't move you up without it, she added. Legal insists. I scanned the page. Dense language, cross-references, a paragraph that kept circling the same idea without saying it cleanly. I felt that familiar pressure time. Expectation. The unspoken cost of slowing things down. Anything I should worry about, her smile didn't reach her eyes. Only if the project fails. That landed wrong. I read the paragraph again. Slower this time. Personal accountability. Sole discretion. No corresponding authority spelled out anywhere nearby. It wasn't framed as a risk. It was framed as proof of confidence. She tapped the signature line with her pen. Once. This is how leadership proves trust. I looked up. She was already leaning back, hands folded, waiting, not anxious. Certain. My name is Marin Caldwell. I'm 42 years old. I had been carrying this project for months by then, fixing gaps no one wanted documented, smoothing over decisions that would have raised eyebrows if they'd been logged properly. I told myself this was just another version of that temporary, necessary, on the way to something better. The pen felt heavier than it should have. I signed. The folder disappeared into her drawer immediately, like it had never been there at all. Good, she said. Now we can focus on delivery. I stood, still holding the pen. Once this goes through, the title follows. She didn't answer that directly. She rarely did. We'll revisit once everything stabilizes. Stabilizes for who that question pressed in hard. Sharp enough to make my chest tighten. Because if she could control the risk herself, why did she need it transferred to me? Her phone buzzed. She glanced down, already shifting away from the moment. You're doing great work. Don't overthink it. I nodded. Because that was the role. I reached for the door, and she spoke again without looking up. Keep this off email. I stopped with my hand on the handle. Of course, I said, and meant it the way she wanted me to. By the time I stepped into the hallway, I understood something I hadn't let myself see yet, whatever that signature was meant to protect. It wasn't me. What broke this time? The question came from across the table before I'd sat down. A vendor rep stared at his screen, jaw tight, waiting for permission to breathe. I flipped the folder open and didn't look at him. Lot tolerance drifted. I said, we can rework. Someone exhaled. Not relief. Calculation. A phone buzzed. I glanced at it once. Her name. I stepped into the hall and answered without greeting. Fix it quietly. She said, no emails. There was a pause on my end. On hers, the faint click of a pen. We're already past first delivery. I said, compliance will ask. They won't if there's nothing to find. The line went dead. Back in the room. Eyes followed me. I pointed at the schedule and kept my voice even. We adjust the sequence. No notes. No CC. A junior analyst hesitated. Shouldn't we? Do you want this escalated? The question cut the air. He shook his head and closed his laptop. It kept going like that. A quality flag here. A supplier deviation there. Each time, the same instruction passed down the chain without a record to anchor it. Each time, my name ended up on the approval line when the dust settled. I signed because the work had to move. I signed because someone had to. At night, after the last call ended, I opened a separate file on my own machine. Timestamps, decision paths, who asked for what, who never answered. I didn't label it anything that would draw attention. I didn't share it. I just built it. The next morning, she stopped by my desk. No greeting, no seat taken. Keep it verbal. She said, you're doing great. I nodded. She lingered, then added, softer. We trust you. Trust felt heavier than pressure. Later that week, compliance called for a quick check-in. I joined, answered narrowly. Kept everything within the lane she'd set. All approvals documented. The voice asked. Yes, I said, and meant the part I controlled. If no one was supposed to leave a trail, why was I the only one signing everything? The call ended. My screen filled with another request. Another decision without a place to land. I added a new branch to the file and saved it. Across the floor, her office door closed. I watched the handle turn and lock, and I kept working. The spreadsheet wasn't hidden. That was the first thing that bothered me. I had opened it expecting a wall permissions, red flags, something that told me I didn't belong there. Instead, it loaded clean. Columns of names, coverage limits, effective dates. Everyone in leadership listed in neat rows, protected against the same kind of failure I'd been absorbing for months. My name wasn't there. I scrolled back up. Down again. Sorted alphabetically. Still nothing. A message popped up on my screen asking if I had a minute. I stood, walked down the hall, and pushed her door closed behind me before the question could fade. She didn't look surprised to see me. That was the second thing that bothered me. I set my laptop on her desk and turned it so the screen faced her. The silence stretched long enough for her to take in the list. The gap, the pattern. She leaned back. That's standard executive coverage, everyone but me. A small shrug. You're not an executive. Yet. Her eyes lifted then. Sharp and assessing. Titles complicate things. I stayed where I was. So does being the only one without coverage. She tapped her finger once on the desk. Not nervous. Deliberate. You're safer where you are. The words didn't rush out. They were placed carefully, like they'd been used before. Safer than who? She smiled. Thin. Safer than someone with visibility. The room went quiet in a way that felt final. The spreadsheet was still open between us. My absence louder than any explanation she could have offered. I felt the fear first, quick and sharp, then something steadier underneath it. If the promotion brought protection, why was protection the one thing being kept from me? She reached forward and closed my laptop. Gentle but firm, "You're doing important work. Let's not derail it." I took a step back. The floor felt solid again. "I won't," I said. She nodded. Already moving on, confident the boundary had been reset, I walked out without arguing, without asking for anything else. Back at my desk, another request waited. Another decision. Another approval with nowhere to land. I opened my private file and added a note beneath the last entry. No emphasis, no commentary, just the fact of what I'd seen across the floor. Her door stayed shut. I kept working, knowing the shape of the trap now, and knowing exactly how much weight it required me to carry. The announcement came through as a calendar invite with no agenda. I walked into the room already knowing I wasn't the reason everyone had been called. The CEO stood at the head of the table with someone I hadn't seen before, polished suit. Relaxed smile. The kind that settles in before anyone asks why it's there. "This is Evan," she said, gesturing lightly. "He'll be stepping into the executive lead role on the program." Evan nodded, eyes moving around the table, landing on me a fraction longer than the others. Not curious, measuring. Applause followed. Uneven and short, the CEO let it fade on its own. "Marin will continue to support," she added. Quietly, support. The word landed like a lid being closed. After the room emptied, Evan lingered near the door. He lowered his voice without looking at me. "She says you're the one who knows where everything is." I didn't answer. He waited, then smiled again. "Good. We'll get along." Later that afternoon, a message flashed across my screen, 2 lines. No greeting. He's flexible. He understands discretion. I stared at it until the words blurred. An hour later, a second message arrived. This one sent by accident and pulled back too late. A fragment lingered in the notification preview. A familiar last name. The same one that appeared in her emergency contacts. The air in the room shifted. This wasn't about skill or experience. It was leverage. She called me into her office before I could ask anything. "You'll help him transition," she said, already moving papers from one pile to another. No friction. Does he know the constraints? Her mouth tightened. He knows what he needs to know. I waited. She finally looked up. "You're indispensable exactly where you are." The sentence was calm, final, and personal. If I stayed, how long before they sacrificed me completely? She dismissed me with a nod. Back at my desk, Evan had sent a follow-up, a single line this time. "We'll keep this clean." I opened my private file and added his name to the web of approvals. The lines connected easily, too easily, across the floor. Her door closed again. The pressure didn't lift. It focused. The message came through with no subject line. "Audit team on site in 30 minutes. Conference room B." I read it twice, then once more without blinking. 30 minutes wasn't a warning. It was a countdown. My screen filled with access requests as if the system sensed what was coming. Evan's name appeared first, flagged urgent, then compliance. Then her office. I stood, walked straight past the glass wall, and pushed her door closed before she could look up. "This isn't funny," she said, eyes already on my face. "We're about to have visitors." I set the paper on her desk. One line, centered. "Good luck." She stared at it, then up at me. The color drained fast. "Is this a joke? How dare you do this today? I didn't move." The clock on her wall clicked over another minute. "You can't resign now," she said. "You're listed everywhere. You're the only one who understands everything you told me to keep verbal." The words came out flat. "Everything you told me not to write down." Her chair scraped back. "Sit down." I slid my badge onto the desk instead. Then my laptop. Then the folder of access keys. All of it. Neat. Intentional. What I didn't place there stayed where it was. Her voice dropped. If you walk out, you're violating your agreement. I looked at the paper again. The agreement she meant lived in her drawer. The one she'd called trust. What happens when they ask how decisions were approved? She didn't answer. She reached for the phone and stopped herself. You built the system. She said, you can't take it with you. I didn't. I said, I just know how to read it. The realization hit then. Not anger. Fear. The kind that comes when leverage evaporates. Turn over everything, she said. I did. The clock clicked again. 15 minutes. The questions start, and I'm not there to translate what you buried. Who explains the gaps? Her mouth opened, closed. She straightened her jacket, already rehearsing a version of the truth that didn't include me. I picked up my bag and moved toward the door. Behind me. Her voice sharpened. You're making a mistake. I paused with my hand on the handle. You taught me timing. In the hallway, security credentials began to expire, one by one. Notifications stacked on my phone, then stopped. Down the corridor, a group of unfamiliar faces waited outside Conference B. Badges clipped, folders in hand. I didn't look back. The first call came before I reached the end of the block. Her name lit the screen. I let it ring until it stopped on its own. A second later, a text followed, no greeting, no punctuation. Call me now. I didn't. 10 minutes passed. Another call. This one left a voicemail. Her voice sounded smaller than I'd ever heard it. Urgent, controlled, but cracked at the edges. We can fix this, she said. You don't want to make enemies over a misunderstanding. I set the phone face down on the table and opened my laptop. No access, no notifications, clean. The third call came from a number I didn't recognize. I answered that one. Marin, a man said, careful and polite. We're trying to understand how approvals were documented. I'm no longer with the company. A pause. Paper shifting. Who can explain the workflow? I waited a beat. The executive office. The line went quiet. Not disconnected. Just quiet. Her call started again after that. Faster, louder. The messages changed to tone. You're breaching your agreement. Legal is preparing a response. This will follow you. I answered once. One line. I followed your instruction. No paper trail. Nothing else. No explanation. No defense. The phone went still for almost an hour. Long enough for the tension to move somewhere else. Then the questions began to stack up, emails forwarded without commentary. Calendar holds from people I hadn't met. A missed call labeled compliance with no follow-up. Each one circled the same absence. Who approved this? Where is the final sign-off? Why does the chain end here? How do you fight someone who refuses to speak? Her last message came just before dusk. They're asking about approvals that don't exist. I didn't reply. I closed the laptop and watched the screen fade to black. Knowing the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was loud enough to force answers. And those answers would have to come from somewhere else. My access went dark at 9:16. Not dramatic. No warning. One moment the dashboard was open. The next it refreshed into a blank permission screen. I closed the lid and waited. The waiting didn't last long. My phone buzzed once, then again, then 3 times in quick succession. Your system is flagging approvals, a voice said when I answered. Clipped and controlled, across multiple workflows, I pictured the logic tree the way I'd built it: quiet, patient, unforgiving. That would happen when the interpreter loses its user. A breath on the other end, papers moving, every chain ends the same way, then it's reading correctly. Another pause. Longer this time. Each flag notes pending final approval. I didn't fill the silence. From the executive office. The voice finished. The next call came from her number. I let it ring until it stopped. Then answered the second time. She didn't bother easing in. You designed this to turn on me. I stayed quiet. You knew this would happen the moment they shut you out. I knew it would raid what was there. Her tone sharpened. You withheld documentation. No, I said. I followed instruction. A sound like a hand hitting a desk. You're responsible for those approvals. The system disagrees. She tried a different angle. They're asking why your name appears everywhere, because it was required. And mine, I thought of the empty signature fields, the neat way absence had become a pattern. The system hadn't accused anyone. It had simply pointed. What do you call negligence when the only missing step belongs to the person who demanded silence? The call ended without a goodbye. An email arrived seconds later. Forwarded from compliance. No greeting. No context. Just a screenshot of a workflow map lit up in red. Each path ending in the same unresolved node. Pending final approval, CEO office. Another message followed. This one from a number I recognized but hadn't saved. We need to understand why executive sign-off was bypassed. I closed the laptop again. Slower this time. The ghost wasn't in the machine. It was in the gaps she'd left behind. Finally visible now that no one was translating them away. Outside, my phone buzzed once more. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The system had started speaking for itself. And it wasn't finished. The call came from a blocked number. We're making leadership changes effective immediately. The voice was careful. Neutral. I waited. She's stepping down. Interim oversight is in place. A breath. Paper sliding across a desk somewhere. The executive lead has been reassigned. I pictured Evan's smile the first day. The way it had never reached his eyes. Remediation is underway. The voice continued. We're reviewing every approval chain. I understand. Silence followed. The kind that invites a response. I didn't offer one. Later that afternoon, another call. Different voice. Same caution. You're not under review, he said quickly. Your documentation clarified several gaps. Gaps. That word again. Are you open to consulting, he asked. Short term. Cleanup. I'm open to clarity. I said, not politics. A pause. Then, fair, by evening. Messages stacked up. Recruiters. Former colleagues. A board member who remembered my name only after it appeared on too many reports. One offer came dressed as flattery. Big title. Bigger promises. Vague answers about authority. Why are you leaving your current role, the man asked. I'm not. I said, I'm choosing the next one. He laughed softly. Like we were sharing a joke. Everyone has to compromise. Do they? I declined without explaining. The silence afterward felt earned. Another message arrived as the day thinned out. Short, direct. They're asking who built the system. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The system didn't belong to me anymore. It belonged to the facts. Near the end of the night, a final call slipped through. No introduction this time. We'd like to talk about next steps, the voice said. On your terms? I looked at the screen, then set the phone down without answering. The collapse wasn't loud. It was procedural. And for the first time since my name had filled that slide, the pressure wasn't on me. Tomorrow would ask for a decision. I let it wait. The call came just after 8. Marin, the voice said, steady and unguarded. I'm stepping into the role today. I didn't congratulate him. I waited. We need help untangling what's left. He continued. Independent, short leash, full access, transparency only. I said, every approval logged. No verbal shortcuts. A pause. Paper moving. Agreed. No shadow systems, I added. If something can't survive daylight, it doesn't get built. Agreed, he said again. Quicker this time. And authority. I said, not a title? The ability to stop work when it's wrong. Another pause. You'll have it. I looked at the screen, then at the inbox that still held one old message I'd never deleted. The subject line was familiar. The promise that had cost me months of quiet compromise. Then I'll come in. I said, on those terms. We ended the call without ceremony. I opened the email. Read it once, not to relive it, just to confirm it no longer had leverage. Then I deleted it. No archive. No recovery. Later that day, a short message arrived from someone I recognized but hadn't saved. They're asking who should approve changes now. I replied with a single line. The process decides, not the person. That night, I shut the laptop and let it stay closed. Here's what I learned if you accept responsibility without authority. You don't earn trust, you become cover. The moment I stopped carrying risk that wasn't mine to own, the system had to face itself. Thanks for staying with this story. If any part of it felt familiar, I'd like to hear what stood out to you. Your thoughts matter more than applause. And if you want to keep going with stories like this, follow along. I'll be here. Choosing clarity. Every time. Get yourself together. Don't embarrass me. The words landed in the middle of the lobby, sharp enough to stop conversations that weren't meant to hear them. People slowed. A security guard pretended to check a badge scanner that wasn't blinking. My coffee shook in my hand, sloshing against the lid. He didn't wait for an answer. He never did. As he turned, his shoulder clipped past mine, close enough that I caught the heat of his irritation. After the board meeting, we'll talk about your future here. The glass doors reflected me back at myself, jaw tight. Eyes dry, shoulders already folding inward the way they always did when there was nothing to say that wouldn't make things worse. I took a step to the side, and that's when someone bumped into me from the other direction, hard enough to tip the cup. Hot coffee spilled across the floor and onto his sleeve. The man in the maintenance uniform froze. A cart rattled. The stains spread. I dropped to one knee before he could apologize. Paper towels. My hand moved on its own, blotting, pushing the mess away from his boots. Don't worry, I'm probably losing my job today anyway. The words came out flat. Not brave, not dramatic, just true. He watched me for a moment without speaking. Not the way people stare when they're curious, but the way they do when they're measuring something. I stood and brushed my palms together. My badge felt heavier against my chest. My name is Serena Cole. I am 36 years old. The thought cut through me because it sounded final. Like a number you write down when you're closing a file, not starting one. I had spent years learning how to disappear inside work, how to make other people look good, how to take the blame quietly and keep moving. The elevator chimed behind us. Someone cleared their throat. The lobby started breathing again. He nodded once, slow, and stepped back toward the cart. No apology. No thanks. Just a look that lingered longer than it should have. I turned toward the elevators, heart pounding hard enough to feel in my ears. If you've ever stood in a place where your job can be taken from you with a sentence, you know the exact weight of that silence. A small note brushed my fingers as I adjusted my bag strap. Something thin and folded where it hadn't been before. A small note. This story is a work created by the writing team at Revenge AITA. The doors slid open. I stepped inside. As they closed, I finally wondered what kind of person stays kind when there's nothing left to protect. The room went quiet the moment he walked in. Same shoulders, same walk, different clothes. The maintenance uniform was gone, replaced by a suit that fit like it had always belonged to him. He didn't look around for a seat. He took the one at the head of the table, set a folder down, and waited for the murmurs to die on their own. Evan's smile came too fast, too wide, the kind he used when he thought charm could smooth over anything. Introductions blurred past me. I watched the man's hands instead. Steady, clean, no rush. When his eyes finally lifted, they went to Evan first, then to me, like he was checking alignment. So, he said, voice level. What does she do here? The question landed sideways. Chairs shifted. Someone near the wall stopped tapping their pen. Evan laughed, light and dismissive. Support work? Minor operational stuff. Keeps the wheels turning. Minor? My jaw tightened. I kept my gaze on the table. The grain in the wood suddenly fascinating. The man at the head of the table wrote something down. Didn't look up. Didn't nod. He let the silence stretch until Evan filled it with another chuckle that didn't land. A page turned. Then his eyes came back to the room. I want the raw operational data from the last 6 months. No summaries. No explanation. No softening. The air changed. I felt it in my chest before my mind caught up. Evan leaned back, folding his hands like this was easy, too easy, across from me. A woman I barely knew pressed her lips together and stared at her notes. Someone else cleared their throat. Why ask about me and then hand me a target? The meeting ended without ceremony. People stood too quickly. Evan brushed past me, close enough that his voice dropped. Busy week ahead. His smile stayed in place, but his eyes didn't. I watched him go, then felt the weight of the room settle back onto me. The man at the head of the table was already gathering his papers. Attention elsewhere, as if the question hadn't cracked something open. My phone buzzed before I reached the door. An internal message pinged in, marked urgent, raw data, end of day. I didn't slow down. The file hit my inbox with a red flag and a deadline stamped across the top. Evan appeared at my desk before I could open it. He didn't pull up a chair. He didn't lower his voice. He leaned in just enough to make it clear this wasn't optional. This needs approval today. I scrolled. Tabs opened too fast. Columns didn't line up. Dates overlapped where they shouldn't. I slowed my breathing and kept my face neutral. There's an issue with the vendor chain. His fingers tapped once on the desk. That's why it's urgent. I clicked deeper. The error wasn't sloppy. It was precise. One field shifted. One approval loop missing. Whoever signed would own the gap. You want my sign-off? He smiled without warmth. Your operations. Operations. The word he used when he needed distance. The word that meant exposure without authority. I'll need time. His hand slid a pen toward me. Blue plastic. The cap already off. You've got it. We can't stall again. The room felt smaller. My screen reflected back at me, eyes too focused. Jaw locked. I reached into my bag for a charger and my fingers brushed paper that hadn't been there before. Folded. Thin. Don't sign anything in blue ink. I froze. The pen on my desk was still rolling. Slow. Toward my wrist. Evan watched me, waiting for movement. The kind of waiting that assumes compliance. Problem. The word carried a warning. I closed the file without saving. I need the original export. His smile twitched. This is the original. My phone buzzed. Another internal message. Marked priority. Same file. Same deadline. Was this a mistake? Or was it meant to see how quickly I'd break? I stood and pushed the pen back across the desk. I'll circle back. He straightened. Blocking my path for half a second too long. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I met his eyes and stepped around him anyway. The note stayed folded in my palm, edges sharp enough to leave an imprint. By the time I reached my desk again, the file had updated. A new approval field appeared at the bottom. My name was already there. All it needed was ink. I was halfway through rewriting the approval trail when a shadow stopped beside my desk. Lunch. The word landed flat, not an invitation. I looked up. Same maintenance jacket? Same neutral expression? No badge this time. No audience. I don't have time. A pause? Not offended. Calculating? You do. I followed him out before I could second guess it. We didn't go far. A small table near the service corridor. Plastic chairs. He sat first. Back to the wall. Eyes on the entrance. Keep pretending you don't know who I am. My fingers tightened around my phone. That's not a small ask. I need him comfortable enough to finish what he started. The sentence carried weight without raising its voice. I watched his hands instead of his face. Steady again. Always steady. You're asking me to play along. I'm asking you to let him believe the trap is working. I thought of the pen, the blue ink. My name already waiting at the bottom of a file that wasn't meant to hold me. If everyone in that building was lying to survive, who decided where the truth ended? I don't get protection. No, I didn't like how clean that answer was. And when this turns on me, a slight tilt of his head. It already has. Silence stretched. People passed without looking at us. He reached into his jacket and slid a folded receipt across the table. Dates, times, vendor codes written small in the margins. Document everything. He added, quietly. I nodded once. Agreement felt heavier than refusal. I slipped the receipt into my bag, then pulled my phone out and changed a setting I'd ignored for years. Automatic backups. Timestamps. No deletions. He stood, chair scraping softly. Don't sign anything. I know. That earned a glance. Brief, sharp, then he was gone. Cart rattling away like nothing had happened. Back at my desk, a new calendar invite waited. End of day review. Mandatory. I opened a fresh document and started typing. Not the numbers, but the order they came in. Who touched what? When? The game had rules now. and none of them favored hesitation. The meeting invite disappeared from my calendar without explanation. 5 minutes later, my screen locked itself. I tried my password. Once. Again. The third attempt didn't even pretend to process. Come with me. The voice came from my left. A woman in a navy blazer stood close enough that people nearby could pretend not to hear. Her badge swung when she turned. Already walking. The room we stopped in was small. The door shut with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have. "This is a precaution," she said, sliding a folder across the table. Not a termination. The words were arranged carefully. The message underneath wasn't. "Hand over your badge." I unclipped it and set it down. The plastic tapped the table and skidded a little, like it didn't want to stop there. "Your access is suspended pending review." Pending meant indefinite. Review meant quiet. I waited. No one filled the silence. "What about my files?" "They're secured." "By someone else." I nodded and stood before she could add anything that would make this feel final. In the hallway, Evan was already there, leaning against the glass. Arms loose. "Smile easy. Timing's rough," he said, eyes flicking to the folder in my hands. "But this will clear up." It wouldn't. We both knew it. My phone buzzed. A message preview lit the screen, then vanished as my account signed itself out. When the elevator doors closed, my reflection looked smaller. I pressed my thumb against the seam of my bag where the receipt was hidden and felt the fold. Still there. At least one thing hadn't been taken. What do you do when every side benefits from your silence? The lobby swallowed me whole. The maintenance cart rolled past. Empty this time. No nod, no signal. Nothing that could be mistaken for help. Outside. I stopped and turned my phone back on. Not to call anyone, but to open a fresh note. Time, names, exact words. I typed until my hand steadied. I wasn't waiting anymore. By the time I walked away from the building, a plan had started to form. Not a rescue, not permission, leverage. She chose the booth with her back to the wall and slid a paper menu aside without looking at it. The phone on the table stayed face down, close to her elbow. "You're late." Traffic was an excuse. Nerves weren't. I sat and placed my bag on the floor. Foot hooked through the strap. "You shouldn't have come," she added. "That means you're desperate." "I'm suspended." I said, "Because hiding it would have been useless." That got her attention. A small smile, quick and sharp, then he moved faster than I expected. She pulled a folder from her jacket and tapped it twice. I kept copies. Not everything. Just enough to remind him I exist. How long years? Her gaze didn't flinch. Monthly? Sometimes weekly. I waited. Silence worked better than pleading. "I'm done," she said. "I want out." Out costs. Her fingers drummed once. 240,000. The number hit hard. Every hour I'd saved. Every plan that assumed tomorrow would be stable. I felt the weight of it settle in my chest. "You don't get to judge me," she said, reading my face. I didn't start it. I survived it. The folder slid closer. Inside. Approvals I recognized. Notes in a margin I had once skimmed and ignored. My name wasn't there. But my timing was. Can the truth stay clean when everyone selling it is dirty? I reached into my bag and placed my phone on the table. Screen dark. Thumb brushing the side until it vibrated once. Soft. She didn't notice. "I'll transfer it," I said. "One time? Today." I nodded. "You send everything." "Not highlights." Her eyes narrowed. Then she pushed the folder across the table. "You're braver than I thought." "No, just done pretending I wasn't part of it." My phone buzzed again. A confirmation message I didn't open. I slipped the folder into my bag and stood. She leaned back, studying me. "You think this fixes you? It fixes the timeline." Outside. I didn't stop walking until the street noise swallowed the diner. I opened the recording app and checked the timestamp. Clear. Complete. My next call went to the bank. The next message went to a secure folder. This wasn't rescue money. It was ammunition. He didn't knock. He never did. The maintenance jacket was gone. The suit was back. He closed the door behind him and set my phone on the table between us. Screen down, like he'd already decided what mattered. "You paid her," he said. Not a question. I didn't reach for the phone. You told me to document everything. A pause, long enough to feel intentional. Good. He sat, hands folded, eyes steady. The room felt smaller with him in it, not crowded, focused. I hired Evan. He continued. Years ago. The words landed clean. No flinch, no apology. I watched my reflection in the black glass of the table and didn't recognize it right away. You knew? I said, yes, and you let it run. I watched it run. My jaw tightened. People lost jobs. So did he, came the reply. Calm as a ledger entry. Just not yet. He leaned back, giving me space he didn't have to give. I don't need someone good at numbers. I need someone who can stare into the abyss and not blink. I felt the weight of the folder in my bag, the recording still warm on my phone, the transfer receipt folded into a corner like a confession. He wasn't offering cover. He was offering exposure with a spine. You weren't testing him. I said, you were testing me. A faint nod. I was testing the system's pressure points. And if I broke, then I'd replace you. 2. Would you accept power built on knowing how broken the system is? Silence settled. Not heavy. Decisive. He stood and slid a thin envelope toward me. No seal, no label. Tomorrow, he said. Final meeting. Let him talk. And after his hand paused on the door, the board needs someone who understands what survives daylight. The door opened. Closed. My phone vibrated once on the table. Then went still. I opened the envelope. An agenda. A single line highlighted. Compliance review lead presenter, Serena Cole. I didn't sit down. I pulled my phone back to me, checked the recording one more time, and started organizing the files in the order they would hurt the most. Tomorrow wasn't about removal. It was about replacement. Evan took the floor like it belonged to him. He didn't wait to be invited. He stood, straightened his jacket, and smiled at the room the way people do when they think the worst is already behind them. This situation spiraled because someone panicked. He began, eyes cutting in my direction. Deadlines were missed. Protocols ignored. A few heads nodded. Not agreement habit. She embarrassed the department. He continued, voice lifting, and when I tried to correct it, she shut down. The word embarrassed hit the same place it had in the lobby. Familiar, worn smooth from use, I stayed seated, hands folded. The screen behind him remained blank. Waiting. He paced, warming to it. I trusted her with sensitive approvals. That trust was misplaced. Trust. Another word borrowed and bent. The chair at the head of the table shifted. Let's walk through it. Came the interruption. Calm, flat, impossible to ignore. Slowly. The lights dimmed without ceremony. The screen flickered on. An email chain appeared. Evan's name sat at the top, bold and centered. The timestamp followed. Then another. Late nights, early mornings. The pattern tightened. He laughed once. Sharp. That's routine. A log replaced the email. Approval loops. Overrides. His credentials repeated down the page like a signature written too many times. Someone near the window inhaled too fast. Evan leaned forward. Those entries were corrected. The screen changed again. Original values. Edited fields. A gap where a review should have been. What happens when a man hears his own lies echoed back to him? The room didn't answer. It didn't need to. Evan's hand lifted, then dropped. This is out of context. Another click. The context arrived. Internal notes. Warnings flagged and dismissed. A comment thread ending with a single line. Proceed as discussed. Silence spread, thick and absolute. Evan stopped pacing. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. I felt the shift before anyone spoke. Not relief, not victory. Gravity. The chair at the head of the table scraped softly as it moved closer to the screen. We're not finished, came the voice behind me. I didn't look back. I already knew. The rope was tight now. All that was left was to see who else it would pull down. The room held its breath while the last log faded from the screen. Evan found his voice first. This is selective. You're framing process gaps as intent. I stood, not fast, Not slow. The movement alone shifted a few eyes away from him and toward me. You told me not to embarrass you. I let the pause stretch just long enough to hurt. But your existence is the embarrassment of this building. A murmur rippled and died. Evan's mouth tightened. He looked past me, searching for rescue that didn't come. I turned back to the screen and tapped my phone once. A new file opened. Different sender. Same pattern. These approvals didn't start with him. The cursor highlighted a date before my suspension. Before the warning note, before the lobby. They started when oversight was removed. A chair scraped. The sound was small, but it landed. The next slide appeared. An email thread marked confidential. The top name wasn't Evans. Silence sharpened. I'm not finished. My hands didn't shake. I noticed because I expected them to. When the system rewards speed over review, someone has to decide what gets ignored. The air changed again. Not toward me. Toward the head of the table. Evan tried once more. She's deflecting. I didn't look at him. I paid for evidence. The words landed heavy. I recorded the exchange. I transferred the funds. I kept the timestamps. A few people shifted like they wanted to leave and couldn't. What does justice look like when it reaches even the powerful I face the table? I didn't do this to save myself. I slid the phone forward. I did it because silence was cheaper. And I'm done paying for it. No one spoke. Not agreement. Not denial. The chair at the head of the table moved again. Closer now. The screen stayed lit. Names frozen in place. Proceed. Came the instruction. Quiet and final. I sat, pulse steady, knowing the next decision wouldn't be about guilt. It would be about who stays standing when the lights don't turn away. They didn't raise their voices when they took him. They didn't have to. Evan stood while the room stayed seated. His jacket hung wrong on his shoulders, like it belonged to someone else now. A hand touched his elbow. Another badge scanner beeped somewhere down the hall. He tried to say something, then stopped. Realizing no one was waiting for it, the chair at the head of the table turned toward me. You're not returning to your role, came the statement. Careful and measured. I'm not. I agreed. That role trained me to look away. A pause. Not resistance. Assessment. I want an independent compliance division. I continued. No shared approvals. No shortcuts. Direct reporting to the board. The silence stretched, then settled. A nod. A pen moved. The decision landed without ceremony, which told me it would hold. Weeks later, I sat in the lobby again. Same glass, same security desk, different weight in my chest. I opened a container I'd packed that morning and took a bite without checking my phone. The food was fine. Nothing special. This lunch isn't great, but it's mine. Completely mine. I learned something I didn't want to learn. Silence feels safe until it costs more than speaking. Once you notice that line, you can't pretend you don't see it again. I'm done paying with my name, my time, or my self-respect. If you stayed with me through this, thank you. Stories like this don't end with applause. They end with quieter choices that hold up over time. If parts of this felt familiar, share your thoughts in the comments. I read them. And if you want more stories about drawing boundaries and taking control back, stay with me and follow along.